Welcome to another episode of Bluecorp Techbytes. On this episode of Bluecorp Techbytes, we have Mr. Ray Elenteny, who is an enterprise architect backed over 30 years of experience in diverse technical domains. He is a Docker and Kubernetes evangelist in the Atlanta chapter and a frequent writer on DZone and writes mostly about microservices and containerization. Now, Mr. Ray is not a stranger to us at Bluecorp, as we have previously worked on projects architected by him related to Java microservices and Kubernetes. Welcome to Bluecorp Techbytes, Ray.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the invitation. I look forward to our conversation today.
And Ray, our topic for today would be mainly on managing technical debt. Now, to start off our discussion, if you could tell our audience what a technical debt is and why is it important for organizations to manage it?
Sure, happy to. So technical debt, is an application, or even the deployment of that application that's aged, perhaps, right? And it hasn't been well taken care of. And what it does is starts creating a burden on the business to maintain that application, whether that be just the deployment of that application or the evolution. It could also be new code. I've been in applications with new code that maybe has been poorly written or written in a hurry to make a date. There's things like poor or short-sighted design. It doesn't anticipate making changes to the application to respond to market demands. It could be vulnerabilities, right? It could be vulnerabilities that are introduced into older software as well. That's a big topic for a lot of folks too. So it boils down to either a technology code base that has been let go. Think about a tree that's not pruned or trimmed and it just gets out of hand and it's hard to take care of, or new software that is hurried. For one reason or another, that there's left a trail of challenging technical situations left in that code base.
Now, Ray, in one of your articles, you rightfully mentioned that the total cost of operating an application is eventually going to be much larger than the initial development cost. So now the decisions made early will always have a ripple effect. Now, isn't this an obvious reason why someone needs to make an investment today rather than postponing it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it sure seems obvious, right? Because it's once again, this is a lot of analogies to the real world about this. You make an investment and you reap the rewards of that investment, no matter what it is. And if you build a house poorly, you're going to obviously pay for that down the road. Software is exactly the same way, and it can. And I've been in many meetings and organizations over the years where from the top down, the C-level suite all the way down, because we will not have technical debt in our applications. We will not. We're going to ensure the best practices that come into play, or that their architects or our managers tell us that we need to do, and they'll even look to create an environment of not having technical debt. However, reality hits, right? And at the end of the day, software is about taking a business to the next level, whatever that means to the business, and that also ends up but moving into the territory of dates and commitments to customers, to shareholders, to whatever the constituency is of that business. You start having date pressure, and date pressure. And while there's ways to do this in the Agile shop, and the purists in the Agile world will say there's many ways to manage it. At the end of the day, there's date pressure. And then when date pressure comes in, shortcuts are taken to get that product out the door in time. Design decisions are left to more junior developers because there's so much going on. The senior guys and gals can't pay attention to the whole suite of software. And sometimes those design decisions by junior developers are a bit short-sighted just due to their lack of experience. And the code just has to get done. Might seem is at any cost. It can sure seem that way, as the project goes, is that we've got to hit the end of the quarter, we've got to hit the end of the year, and it doesn't matter. And while I think most organizations, and of course developers, I'm an optimist by nature, people have the best intentions, in mind, but the realities of business often come into play. And this just opens the door to introducing technical debt in a new product, as well as having it just sit around in old products.
Now, it's common, I think, we still see there are organizations managing legacy applications with poor code bases. Now, they might have their own reasons for doing this. They might be doing this because of resource constraints, or just because the application itself, simply serves its purpose. Now, Ray, what are the risks you see in this kind of approach?
Yeah, at the end of the day, the way I look at this is that eventually the day of reckoning will come, right? And it's, you may not know when that day of reckoning will come, and unfortunately, it can come, well, it never is at a good time, right? But one of the things that pops into my head, and I've spent a lot of my career working in the financial industry and also in healthcare, but this really applies to any business. But those two industries are sensitive, right, for a lot of reasons. And vulnerabilities, to me, are the things that come into play for me, initially. The older a piece of software has been around, the more vulnerable it is to attack. And that may not be the code in and of itself, right? It may be third-party components that you're using, and they've aged, and vulnerabilities have been found. And it doesn't matter whether it's a proprietary component or open source components. And and the last thing that you want the day of reckoning to be is your application to be hacked, right? And financial records or personal records being released. We hear about this all the time. It's real, and it's not. I don't mean it to be as a scare tactic, but it's just real. And so vulnerabilities to me are a key aspect of the longer a piece of software is around, the more vulnerable it is. And interestingly enough, vulnerabilities aren't always about being attacked from the outside. Vulnerabilities and a lot of breaches in systems are really inside attacks, if you will. Some, a malicious employee can, get into a piece of a system that they shouldn't get to. So it's not just web attacks, right? There's internal vulnerabilities that have to be dealt with as well. So that's, that's the first thing that comes to my mind, and it's a life that I've lived, over many years. But also too, and this is stating the obvious, right? Business have this great reliance on applications, and a day will come when an application can no longer serve its purpose for any number of technical debt reasons. Vulnerabilities we just mentioned, right? Third-party products no longer supported. There's if you're using it doesn't really matter what kind of component it is, and the vendor says we're no longer supporting that version. Or they get acquired, and the acquirer says we're no longer, going to deliver that piece of software. That can be a major issue, and then the business has to decide what they're going to do about this. As well, it gets to be very difficult to maintain a competitive edge, right? The more debt you have, and the more time you're spending, trying to just keep the application running, is less time to add features to maintain a competitive edge, with your competition. And so that's a very important, obviously very important part of software. And there's increased costs, simply beyond the code base of having a team or teams just, keeping a product alive in some cases, right? You have hosting environments, you have runtime environments. Older software often needs very specific types of environments to run on. It may not be able to run, in the cloud, for example. It may not be able to run even on a virtual machine in some cases. And these are increased costs that a business will incur as technical debt mounts. And this is part of technical debt as well. And so the risks are, your vulnerability, of course, but the risks are, the reliance of the application of the business to run its business on that application. And the time will come where a component or maybe a whole application can no longer really be supported and the business is in jeopardy.
Okay, understood. Now, Ray, you are a big evangelist of microservices and containerization. Now, how do you see these advantages in application architecture make it easier for organizations to manage the future of technical debt?
Yeah, another great question. And my first response to that is quite interesting. Is that I have been in the containerization world now for about seven years, almost since it started. From a publicly released perspective. The answer to a lot of questions today is to containerize it, right? And the analogy that's often used, over here at least, is, just because you have a hammer, not everything's a nail, right? And so I am a firm believer of microservices and containerization. However, they need to be approached from a technical debt perspective in a very specific way, I believe. And I do think that they do assist as well. So when you look at a legacy code base, the first thing you have to think about is, what's the life expectancy of this thing? Is it going to be around, for 5 more years? Is that the anticipation? Well, okay, then now we're talking about a candidate for a microservices environment. If not, maybe it's a candidate for a hybrid environment where you start to evolve the application, leave the existing application the way it is, and then start evolving the application into a more microservice-based approach that can be containerized, and maybe perhaps run some of that on the cloud, some of it on-prem, and work on that evolution. And so you have to look at breaking the application up, which you're going to have to do anyway. And there's a number of design principles that can be applied software-wise to do this. I'm a big Gang of Four book proponent still from back in the 90s. And there's a number of design principles that can be used to take a legacy application and evolve it to a containerized application, and not have to do a big bang approach where it's all or nothing. No company is going to have an appetite for, hey, give us, a year to rewrite this application. They're going to want to know, how do we evolve this? For new applications, I say start with a sensible microservice design up front. Segment the application into discrete units of business functionality. And when you have the opportunity with a new application, you can start with a container first approach. I'm a big fan of the container first approach. It enforces good design in my mind, to divide things into discrete components. And so I think there's a lot of value in that. But in both cases, what you've done then is you've segmented the application into code that can evolve independently. So a key factor in microservice focuses on, the contract across those applications. This is just designed by contract now, instead of, interface-based design, regardless of your tech stack, to now interface-based design across processes. And just like in code, as long as the contract is maintained, what happens behind the contract, if you will, behind the curtain, that code can evolve, and new applications as well as legacy applications. And so you can maintain the business with some older software that with a new contract, using for example, a facade pattern, and then evolve the older technology and keep the lights on, if you will, in the business, and gradually attack that. It also allows the business to manage technical debt in isolated situations. If they have a critical area or an area that they want to really advance from a marketing perspective, we say, let's address the technical debt in this area here, and that way we can meet our competitors, our competition better. The other area here is just the deployment environment itself. So containerization allows for deployment flexibility. We had it with virtual machines. Were definitely a big deal with that. Several years ago, containerization takes this to another level, and the cost of running an application is just as important as the code. And having deployment application through containerization can really help a business with the runtime costs on this. And you can run maybe an older app for a while alongside a newer app without building, this big, huge, doubling the size of your data center, for example. And by containerizing things and gradually bringing things forward. So you get the advantage of deployment flexibility in containerization as well, which helps tremendously with the costs of this evolution from a legacy app to a more contemporary architecture.
Now, compared to 10, 15 years ago, I'm sure that currently there are a lot of options available for organizations to manage these technical debt with fewer resources and much less cost. Now, I know for a fact the availability of public cloud is a huge advantage. Now, it doesn't cost, an arm or a leg to hire engineers, since, companies like ours, we provide IT talent for a fraction of the cost, of on-site hires. How can an organization use these advantages that are available out there to effectively pay off their technical debt?
Yeah, so I look at the cloud similar to containerization in that is the same thing, is that, it's often thought of as the answer to many technical challenges, right? And but I, at the same time, I'm a huge proponent of it and a believer of it. So there's a real advantage into it, but a company needs to move into this environment with a kind of an eyes wide open. You need to know what you're getting into when you go into the cloud. It takes some serious planning to put yourself into the right position to make this work. And when you do that upfront planning and you strike the right relationships, not just with your cloud vendor, but with your technology partner who's going to help you get there, this is a huge advantage in terms of managing technical debt and getting kind of getting off of your legacy technology if that's your goal, or evolving your legacy technologies. It's a very cost-effective and practical solution to managing the technical debt challenge and bringing a business a great competitive advantage. So I'm a big fan of it, and along with containerization, it's even it's almost kind of a double advantage, right? Because you get the scalability and really elasticity. The term of scalability, I think, fades away because elasticity is the word, right? Growing and shrinking automatically and dynamically based on the needs of your business, and let the systems do that. And the cloud is amazing for doing that kind of thing. Oh, maybe you have a peak at the at the end of every quarter in your business, whatever maybe you're an accounting software, right? And everybody's doing their reports at the end of the quarter. Well, if it's designed right, the cloud will automatically expand your load, your resources at the end of the quarter. It'll notice that and then shrink it back down, when everybody's done with their load. This is huge. The same thing in terms of migrating legacy applications. Most applications are on virtual machines. Now, there's a few that aren't, legacy applications, but you can take those VMs and you can put them in the cloud, if you will, and allow them to work alongside your newer applications that are containerized. You can use the hybrid strategy of stuff that's still on-prem versus stuff that's in the cloud. There are some challenges there, but you do have the ability to take those legacy apps and put them on the cloud as well to really leverage that. Now, you mentioned globalization of technical talent. I've seen this evolve, you say, over 10 to 15 years, and that's probably about the right time frame. The past few organizations I've worked with, it's been a global shops, right? Global development shops. Whether they're hires, within just distributed teams within a company, or outsourcing firms. It's advantageous from so many ways, right? But there's multiple facets to this, and so when I look at an opportunity to expand a team, to look beyond internal resources, I look at it for three different perspectives. Number one, it's hiring specialized talent to evolve an application, right? So you may need, you want to evolve this application from point A to point B. And I may not want to have my team do it, but my team may not have the skill to evolve an application. There's a certain nuance to it, right? And there's a certain set of design strategies to apply to it. Then you've got cloud and containerization. And so you may hire outside talent to get you there, right? And help you design that. You might hire a team to get you over the hump, right? Get the application back on the right track. Maybe it's getting refreshing all the third-party components, addressing any legacy design issues that might be there. That may be considered more of a short-term kind of thing, but short-term is relative depending on the complexity of the application. But you might bring a team in just simply to get you over the hump and get through this. And then finally, in a situation where the application may have a life expectancy that's known, 1 or 2 years, you may hire a team that simply, hey, I just need this application to be maintained and evolved, for the next 2 years because we're killing it, right? And that might mean still bringing up some of the app components up to date and doing some maintenance on it, but and that's really a sustained mode, right? So there's really three areas. I'm not a proponent, even if it was an internal team. It's rare that you kill an app completely, because there's always value to it. But some companies may do that. You may kill it over time. But those are the three things I look: specialized talent to help about that application, some temporary help just simply to get that legacy application up to date. Maybe even if you want to keep it running the same way, and then finally, hey, we're going to sunset this application. We need some help over the next 2 to 3 years, picking a number. That's usually about how long it takes, that you can help us maintain this while we sunset that application and get our customers maybe up to the newer version of the software or something like that. That's how I look at the evolution, and how a team, a company like yourself, and how you have, for me in the past, helped get us through these things.
Exactly. Great. So now we've almost come to the end of our whole session. So what would your final message be for company leaders, listening to Bluecorp Techbytes today?
Yeah, it's there's so many aspects to this question, and so I'm going to approach it strategically, right? And the first thing is you may look at your application and say, nobody's touched this thing in 2 years. This is just too big, right? I don't even know where to start. It may seem daunting because there might be a lot to deal with. But technical debt needs to be addressed in a focused manner. And you've got to use good design principles, because good design principles are going to help you dig out of the hole that's in. And you want to strategically attack the issue. And so what does that mean? Well, I'll talk about that in a second, but you need to strategically attack that issue. The term I often use is establish a beachhead. You think about, kind of a war strategy, if you will. And if it's you look at, how are you going to, deal with this battle? Well, the first thing that's typically done is you establish a beachhead. You get there, you establish a perimeter, and you start approaching, your enemy, if you will, in this case, technical debt, in pieces. And you can't take it all at once. It's too much. It's whether it's too much due to cost, it's too much due to resources, which is cost as well, or it doesn't let you address other important aspects of your business. It just doesn't make sense to take it all. So, figure out where the right place is to start, and then develop a strategy on that. And as you walk into that and you start working it, you'll find out, you'll discover the other areas. Okay, this is our next one. This is our next one. This is our next one. And so you take that daunting task and you make it, kind of bite-sized pieces that you can get your head around and help the business understand. But the key is especially for technologists, they need to understand that technical debt is much larger than a technical problem. It's a business problem. Technical debt affects the bottom line of the business. The term total cost of ownership comes up. You mentioned it earlier. The cost of an application is far greater after that initial release. The typical number that if you would do some reading on it, the kind of the rough number is 2/3 of the cost of the business of the software occurs after it's initially written, and that's over the short term, and that could even get larger as time goes by. So total cost of ownership affects the bottom line of any organization. So how much is it costing me to run and maintain this piece of software? The other and maybe more forward-looking perspective on this is missed opportunity and competitive advantage. We mentioned earlier that software is used to and applications are used to help a business, and doesn't matter what it is, it's helping the business. And every piece of software contributes to the business, whether it be the bottom line of the business, which is a cost savings, or outrunning your competition and gaining more business. Whether you're a product company developing products, or whether you're developing software in-house, you're still in competition with somebody, right? And technical debt is an anchor, if you will, that keeps you from maintaining a competitive advantage. And you cannot be nimble. And so it's not just about, software that I've got this, kind of weight around me. It's also about, I can't be nimble. If a competitor comes out with a feature and my architecture doesn't allow me to quickly address that, or my, and a whole different topic, my whole deployment pipeline doesn't allow me to quickly address that issue, I'm going to lose business. I'm going to lose out business to that competition. In the same way, infrastructure and deployment capabilities are the same way here, right? They can be leveraged as a competitive advantage. It's not all about application features. It's how quickly can you deliver. That gets into your cloud deployment. That gets into microservices. How quickly can you deliver those features? And technical debt can seriously impede these issues. The thing I use often, and people, consumers of applications, whether they be internal or not, expect this. We all have mobile phones, and we all expect the apps. We all see how often the apps are updated on our mobile phones, right? It's constant. People that creeps into people's thought processes, right? So that when they're using a business application, they're thinking, well, why can't I get this feature just as quickly as my phone updates? There's no a user doesn't separate the use of their business application, the complexity of that versus the use of some other, what they might think is a simple application, or what an enterprise developer might think of as a simple application on the phone. To a user, there's no difference. And they're going to expect that same level of agility, in a competitive fashion. So approaching, as a technologist, approaching a business and saying, these are the things we have to watch for technical debt, and painting that story will help a technologist start to be able to carve out some budget, if you will, to address technical debt, and whether it is to partner with a company such as Bluecorp, or carve out a hybrid situation of internal and external resources. That's how it gets started. You can't start it from a business saying, hey, we have all of this problem with the technology. A CEO could care less, right? If you present it from the perspective is that we are going to lose business, or we cannot maintain our competitive advantage until we take care of this, then you're going to get the visibility at the C-suite, and get the resources that you need to make this happen. So that's how I would approach it, and that's how I do approach technical debt, from a business perspective, not from a technology perspective.
So now, Ray, it was really a pleasure to have you at Bluecorp Techbytes, and I think this information that you shared with us, I know we didn't deep dive really into technical debt, but I'm sure you shared some amazing points that would be useful for our viewers out there. So thank you, Ray, for being a part of Bluecorp Techbytes.
My pleasure, and happy to be a part of your podcast here, and I look forward to perhaps joining you in the future on a new, different topic.
Definitely, we'd love to have you. And to all those who are watching Bluecorp Techbytes, you could always reach out to Ray on LinkedIn. We would have him on a description. And thank you, guys. And until next time, bye bye.